In 2017, Universal Pictures sought to build its own version of Marvel Studios' empire. They had everything you'd think you'd need: a vault of legendary monsters, decades of built-in recognition. A roadmap for an entire interconnected universe was already mapped out before a single frame had even hit theaters. All that was missing was the film that would make it real. So they bet big. They put the entire launch on the shoulders of Tom. They built a global campaign and went as far as announcing future films before this one even proved itself. And then The Mummy came out. But within weeks, the reviews were brutal. Audiences were confused. Within months, the entire dark universe was dead. Every planned sequel was gone. This is how one movie killed an entire cinematic universe before it even started. But what actually went wrong started long before the cameras rolled. To understand how The Mummy went so wrong, you have to go back to where the idea started. The plan: building a universe around The Mummy. Universal had been trying to relaunch its classic monsters for years. They attempted it with 2010's The Wolfman, which underperformed. They tried again with 2014's Dracula Untold, which was originally supposed to be the start of a connected universe before the studio quietly distanced itself from it. Neither film gave them the momentum they needed, but by the mid-2000s, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was printing money. The Avengers had grossed over $1.5 billion. Captain America: The Winter Soldier and Guardians of the Galaxy had proven that audiences would show up for lesser-known properties. Every studio in Hollywood wanted their own version. Universal figured they had an advantage nobody else did. They owned the original shared universe. Their monsters had been crossing over into each other's films since the 1940s. Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, House of Dracula. The blueprint was already there. So they built a plan around The Mummy. Alex Kurtzman, a writer and producer known for his work on the first two Star Trek reboots and Mission Impossible 3, was brought on to develop The Mummy as the official first entry in the Dark Universe. Kurtzman was paired with Chris Morgan, who had helped revitalize the Fast and Furious franchise, to serve as co-architects of the entire shared universe. The studio gave Kurtzman the director's chair as well, despite the fact that he had only directed one feature film before this. Then, Tom Cruise entered talks to star in late 2015, and his involvement changed everything. Universal reportedly gave Cruise contractual control over most aspects of the film: script approval, post-production decisions, even significant input on the marketing strategy and release date, pushing for a prime June slot in the middle of summer blockbuster season. Why? Because Cruise was a global brand, a one-man insurance policy against failure. The thinking was simple: put the biggest movie star on the planet inside your universe-launching tentpole, and audiences will show up. That was the intent, but they were wrong. The power struggle, when control became the problem. Once Tom Cruise was locked in, The Mummy stopped being Universal's movie. It became his movie. The original screenplay had gone through several hands. John Spates wrote an early draft, then Jenny Lumet came in for rewrites and made the notable decision to change the titular mummy from male to female, creating the character of Princess Amenet. Her goal was to humanize the villain and avoid making the antagonist evil simply for the sake of it. There was a version of this film that was a dark, character-driven horror piece with a tragic antagonist at its center. Then Cruise arrived, and the script began shifting in a very different direction. Christopher McQuarrie, Cruise's frequent collaborator and the director of the later Mission Impossible films, was brought in alongside Dylan Cussman and David Koepp to rework the screenplay. Their rewrites expanded Cruise's role significantly while reducing Sofia Boutella's screen time as the Mummy. They also added a plotline where Cruise's character becomes possessed, giving him a more dramatic arc. Universal was reportedly unhappy with many of these changes, but deferred to Cruise's star power and let the rewrites proceed. But the script was just the beginning. The film's supervising art director later described the production as a project split into two halves, before Tom and after Tom. Whether Cruise was saving a troubled production or making it worse depended entirely on who you asked. Some crew members felt he was the only reason the film held together at all. He knew action sequences better than anyone on set. He could look at a planned stunt and tell the director in 30 seconds why it wouldn't work. Others believed he was turning what was supposed to be a horror movie into a Tom Cruise action vehicle, complete with motorcycle chases, helicopter crashes, and a leading man who never seemed scared, only determined. On set, the dynamic between Cruise and director Alex Kurtzman became the defining story of the production. Multiple sources described Cruise as functioning like the film's de facto director, dictating major action sequences, micromanaging creative decisions, and stepping in when Kurtzman struggled with the scope of a $125 million tentpole. Kurtzman had only made one small drama before this. Now he was being told how to frame shots by the most powerful movie star in the world. The tone of the film became a battlefield. Cruise wanted Mission Impossible with monsters. Kurtzman wanted a horror film with weight. Universal wanted a franchise launchpad. The result was a film that felt pulled in too many directions at once and pleased none of them. Consider the Russell Crowe subplot. Crowe plays Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde as a bridge character to future Dark Universe films. That subplot ate up a significant chunk of the second act. It had almost nothing to do with the Mummy storyline and existed purely to set up movies that would never get made. That wasn't Cruise's doing. That was Universal's corporate mandate. But here's the problem. Cruise had control over his scenes, not the world building. So you ended up with a film where the lead actor was optimizing for his own action hero arc, while the studio was optimizing for a shared universe. And nobody was optimizing for a coherent movie. The editing room became the final battleground. Cruise had post-production approval. That meant every cut, every sound mix, every color grade had to pass through him. Kurtzman later called The Mummy the biggest failure of his life, both personally and professionally. In interviews years later, he described the production as brutal and attributed the problems to having too many cooks in the kitchen. He also acknowledged that the experience fundamentally changed how he approached directing, saying he didn't truly become a director until he made that film. That's a polite way of saying, Tom Cruise directed this movie, and it didn't work. The irony is that Cruise's control wasn't born from ego alone. He had seen franchises fail. He had seen studios make terrible decisions. He genuinely believed he was saving the film. And maybe, in some parallel universe, a version of The Mummy exists where Cruise's instincts produced a lean, mean, action horror hybrid that audiences loved. But that's not the universe we live in. In our universe, The Mummy opened to $31.7 million domestically, the lowest opening in the history of the franchise. And the power struggle that defined its production became the blueprint for everything that followed. A film with no singular vision, a director who couldn't direct, and a star who couldn't stop starring. The Collapse, a film that didn't know what it was. So, what did audiences actually see on June 9th, 2017? A movie that couldn't decide if it wanted to scare them, thrill them, or sell them on 5 sequels. Let's start with the identity crisis. The Mummy opens with a prologue in ancient Egypt, dark, supernatural, genuinely eerie. Princess Amenet makes a deal with a primordial evil, gets mummified alive, and the screen goes black. For about 5 minutes, you think you're watching a horror film. Then Tom Cruise shows up. He's a treasure-hunting soldier of fortune who cracks jokes, steals artifacts, and brawls with his own partner. Suddenly, the movie is a Mission Impossible light. Fast cuts, wisecracks, and a hero who never breaks a sweat. Then the Mummy awakens. She commands swarms of rats, drains souls, and stalks her victims through shadowy corridors. That's horror again. Then Russell Crowe appears as Dr. Jekyll, delivers a 5-minute monologue about a secret organization called Prodigium, and turns into Mr. Hyde for a CGI punch-up. That's franchise setup. The film lurches between these modes like a car with 3 drivers fighting for the wheel. One scene, Cruise's character is possessed by the Mummy. His eyes go black and he stabs a colleague. Genuinely disturbing. Next scene, he's running from an exploding building in slow motion. Pure action hero. The tonal whiplash gave audiences motion sickness. Now add the marketing confusion. Universal's trailers sold The Mummy as a dark, scary reboot. Dark lighting, screaming, a menacing voiceover. death is only the beginning. But TV spots focused on Cruise doing Cruise things. If you saw the first trailer, you bought tickets for a horror movie. If you saw the second, you expected Mission Impossible Egypt. And then there was the world building, the stuff that killed any chance of emotional investment. About 45 minutes into The Mummy, the film grinds to a complete halt so Russell Crowe can explain the dark universe. He shows Cruise's character a secret lab full of captured monsters. He name-drops Dracula and the Wolfman. He talks about a coming darkness that only Prodigium can stop. None of this has anything to do with The Mummy. None of it advances the plot. It's a PowerPoint presentation for movies that don't exist yet. Audiences felt it. Critics slaughtered it. One review described The Mummy as feeling less like a movie and more like a series of compromises worked out by a corporate committee. So why did audiences disconnect? Because they couldn't find anyone to root for. Brendan Fraser's 1999 Mummy worked because Fraser was in on the joke, a goofy, self-deprecating everyman who stumbled into heroism. Tom Cruise, by contrast, plays every role like he's the most competent person in the room. Brendan Fraser himself later commented on what went wrong. He acknowledged how difficult it is to make a mummy film work, but pointed to one key missing ingredient: fun. The 2017 version took itself too seriously. It wanted to be dark and intense when the material called for something lighter. And that's the tragedy of The Mummy. It wasn't just a bad film. It was a film that betrayed its own nature. Horror fans hated the action. Action fans hated the horror. Franchise fans hated the awkward setup. And general audiences? They just stayed home. The Mummy debuted to $31.7 million domestically. By its second weekend, The Mummy fell 54%. By its third, it had been pulled from over 800 theaters. Domestically, it topped out at just $80 million. The breaking point had arrived for The Mummy, and everything Universal had built on top of it. The fallout: how it killed a franchise before it began. The Mummy opened on June 9, 2017. By September, the Dark Universe was dead. Let's track the timeline. The Mummy had been in theaters for just 4 months when Universal postponed Bride of Frankenstein indefinitely. That film had been slated for 2019 with Javier Bardem, Johnny Depp, and Angelina Jolie lined up. But the phone stopped ringing. Within 6 months of release, architects Alex Kurtzman and Chris Morgan had both walked away from their roles overseeing the franchise. By January 2019, Universal officially scrapped the Dark Universe entirely. This was Hollywood's most expensive failed launch since John Carter. Industry reaction was swift and brutal. Variety ran a post-mortem titled "How Universal's Dark Universe Crumbled." The Hollywood Reporter detailed the behind-the-scenes power struggles. Rival studios, which had watched nervously as Universal announced a dozen films, quietly breathed relief. One executive told THR, "They announced the finish line before they even started the race." That became the consensus. Universal had done everything wrong that Marvel had done right. Marvel built one film at a time. Universal built a logo first. Marvel earned its crossovers. Universal assumed them. The financial math was merciless. The Mummy lost an estimated $95 million. But the real damage was the opportunity cost. Universal had spent years developing the Dark Universe. They had paid for scripts, hired talent, and reserved release dates. All of that vanished. The studio's monster IP, one of the most valuable horror catalogs in history, went from a potential billion-dollar franchise to a cautionary tale taught in film schools. So what did this mean for Tom Cruise? In the short term, surprisingly little. Cruise's career has always been bulletproof in a way that defies Hollywood logic. The Mummy was his third consecutive franchise misfire after Edge of Tomorrow and Jack Reacher: Never Go Back. But Cruise did what Cruise always does. He went back to what worked. He poured himself into Mission Impossible: Fallout, 2018, which grossed $791 million and reminded everyone why he was the last true movie star. Then Top Gun: Maverick, 2022, made $1.5 billion and won an Oscar. The Mummy became a footnote, not a tombstone. But the failure did change something. Cruise became even more selective. He doubled down on practical stunts, theatrical windows, and projects where he had complete creative control. No more shared universe compromises. The lesson he took from The Mummy was, I need to trust myself even more. That arrogance, which helped sink one film, later helped elevate others. And Universal? They learned a different lesson. After the dark universe collapsed, the studio pivoted hard. Instead of big-budget, star-driven spectacles designed to interconnect, they partnered with Blumhouse Productions and started making smaller, standalone monster movies. The first film under this new approach was 2020's The Invisible Man, directed by Leigh Whannell and starring Elizabeth Moss. Made for $7 million, earned $144 million worldwide, and received a 91% on Rotten Tomatoes. That $7 million film validated what a $345 million production could not. Universal's monsters didn't need billion-dollar budgets and A-list ensembles. They needed good stories, strong direction, and the freedom to be what they actually were: horror films. In a moment of perfect irony, the 1999 Brendan Fraser original, the film Universal tried so hard to replace, has only grown more beloved over time. Its 25th anniversary re-release in 2024 drew audiences back to theaters. Fraser himself won an Academy Award in 2023 for The Whale, capping one of the most remarkable career comebacks in Hollywood history. And a fourth film in the Fraser Mummy series, reuniting him with Rachel Weisz, is now reportedly in development. The Mummy, 2017, didn't just fail as a movie. It failed as the foundation for an entire studio strategy. But in doing so, it forced Universal to rethink everything. And that reset ended up producing better films than the dark universe ever would have. Sometimes the biggest disasters lead to the clearest lessons.